Hello, everybody. Duke's here, and before we start today's show, which is about the film Ripley's Game, I want to tell you that we have a live event coming up and that you should save the date. The live event is the viewing of the 1999 Anthony Minghella film, The Talented Mr. Ripley, which I think Chris and I consider to be the best of the Ripley movies, even though they're all pretty good, as you've heard us talk about. That is going to be Monday, May 19th, from 4 to 8-ish Pacific time. So that's 7 to, like 11 Eastern time. We're trying to compromise between East Coast people and West Coast people. The way it will work is we will watch the movie at the same time, and then we'll come together for a live taping on some forum. We're not exactly sure. So the details are forthcoming. But for now, please save the date. Monday, May 19th from 4 p.m. on 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. And with that, let's get into our discussion of Ripley's Game.
I'm a creation. I'm a gifted improviser. I lack your conscience, and when I was young, that troubled me. It no longer does.
I think I've told you about Richard Foreman, the great director of Ontological Hysterical.
Yes.
I wonder what I'm going to do next.
Yes.
like this serious voice of God effect, like crashing down upon you while he sits in the audience next to you speaking into a microphone. It's kind of amazing.
I'm reading, there's a whole BBC legendary radio documentary series that's I want to say 6 episodes long, an hour each, called The Wire, about the way that recorded audio changed the world, or amplified audio changed the world.
Yeah.
And there's also the book I'm reading right now, or one of the books I'm reading right now, also has a whole chapter about essentially the effects of the amplified voice. And I would argue that it is partly responsible for method acting, because you really could not act quiet on a stage. You couldn't take this watch, and you couldn't do that because nobody would hear you, right? And so the ability to play it quiet is actually something that was kind of invented for both radio drama and the cinema era. And Stanislavski and Chekhov's plays were particularly well suited for a quieter, subtler performance too. But
I wonder if some
and
of those...
and I would say being able to put the camera right on the actor's face too, so that you can see the subtlety of you couldn't have Michael Corleone in a play. No, because especially in the first one, Pacino does so much incredibly subtle stuff. Yeah.
Where you're really just watching his face, and there's an eye shift or a little twitch or something like that. And when is my history of amplified voice is rough. What are we talking?
Around the turn of the century. Mine's rough too, but I would say, certainly you have radio broadcasts by the 1920s. And probably the 19-teens. You have talking pictures, but were about right after World War I. I think the technology was being experimented with, but no, I don't even think you have talking pictures until a little later.
30s.
Yeah. So even though maybe the technology
30s.
existed,
yeah.
So early phonographic records. They had microphones in the 19th century.
Yeah.
But they weren't really widespread, and the radio broadcasts weren't widespread. I'd be curious. I really don't know this, but I'd be curious. When was the Scopes trial? Because that was broadcast over the radio. Coverage was.
I would have some rough guesses.
1925. Yeah. I would say 1920s roughly.
Okay.
And by the 1930s, it's a well-established technology. And then, by the 1950s, the radio age is already being supplanted by the television age, so.
I got that I really want to go find out now if any of Chekhov's plays were amplified in any way, or if they weren't, then what the size of the theater was that they were taking place in. Yeah, I need to. I'm curious now.
That would be really interesting. Yeah, and it would be really interesting how quickly. Because, you listen to early radio drama, and there's a certain amount of declamation,
Right, right, yeah.
But at a certain point, when you listen to Orson Welles, he can do both. And so you'll hear him, "What? This is madness. I tell you it's madness." And then laboratory door closes, and then very quietly, "Oh, I'm glad we're rid of those people outside. What do you think the solution is?" And he's clearly using volume and proximity in interesting ways, in the 1930s.
Thank God for that guy.
Oh, he's a genius.
One of those visionaries who was able to figure that out right away. That's
and then oh, by the way, I'll just go ahead and learn filmmaking in a couple of years and make Citizen Kane at age 27 or something like that.
Some of the most amazing films of all time, The Third Man and everything. And
maybe we should take it up a notch and get into only one notch, though. I mean, this is a very base story as well. With a veneer of civilization. We're talking about Ripley's Game, directed by Liliana Calvani, the Italian director, a great Italian director who's famous in some circles, starring John Malkovich as Ripley, Ray Winstone, Dougray Scott, a young Lena Headey as the wife, maybe a few other people I don't recognize. Those are the big four, in my opinion. It was a film that came out in 2002. You and I watched it together. I remember you rented it.
Really? Huh.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I would have tagged you as the one who rented it.
No, you were my introduction to Tom Ripley. I didn't know about that.
Wow.
I hadn't seen The Talented Mr. Ripley. I mean, there was a woman involved, I recall, in the evening. I don't remember which. But the movie starts. We find Tom Ripley in the middle of an art deal gone bad. So he meets Reeves, has set this up. Reeves is kind of a hustler type, and Ripley is going to sell some sketches. But the bargaining goes bad. He ends up killing a bodyguard, and then he goes ahead and takes the money and the art. And we go from fenced forgery to just outright robbery,
larceny.
Yeah. And we have the sense that Ripley's sort of ethics were he was going to honor the terms of the deal, but when the bodyguard drew a gun, then all ethics go out the window. So the deal was arranged by Reeves Minute, played by Ray Winstone as a sort of cockney belligerent. Who he pays off, and then he heads back home to his lovely Italian estate. The setting has been moved from the canonical Ville Paris of the and Belle Ombre of the novels to a kind of rural Italian estate, but kind of similar feel. He has a beautiful home, mansion, really, or villa. He's living a bon vivant with his harpsichordist wife, Louisa, rather than Eloise, the sort of Italian version. He has a great cook. And then we also pretty quickly meet his picture framer has stopped by with a new frame, Jonathan Trevanny, who we learn is a picture framer with a blood disease who invites Tom and his wife, Louisa, over for a dinner party.
Yes. And if any of this source material feels really familiar, it's because the same, the novels are getting adapted by filmmakers, as we kind of talked about earlier, taking the source material and doing different things with it. And Ripley Underground kind of combines Ripley's Game and Ripley Underground. An American Friend, again, is playing with different elements of all of these things. And so we're sort of traversing the same kind of plot as we did in An American Friend, but treated in diametrically different ways.
But the novel is based on the novel Ripley's Game, and but with some elements and hints of Ripley Underground and the first one too.
Yeah. So Ripley shows up at the party where Trevanny kind of drunkenly insults him in this incredible scene where Ripley just kind of oils up to the edge of the room, and Trevanny doesn't notice him.
Yeah.
But everybody else notices, while Trevanny basically says that Ripley is rich but has no taste, which for Tom Ripley is probably one of the worst things that you can say. We've time skipped. We've jumped 3 years into the future. And so when Minut shows back up at Ripley's estate looking for some help because he needs to kill somebody, Ripley at first is like, I really thought I told you I never wanted to see you again. Ray Winstone's Reeves Minut is sort of desperate and kind of incompetent and played brilliantly. And he needs, just like we learned in American Friend, he needs somebody bumped off.
He's a good arm twister.
Yeah. He's
pushy and
he's
persistent.
Right, exactly. The word he's intransigent. He just won't give up. He just keeps going. And Ripley knows that Trevanny is sick, and suggests to Minot that Trevanny is the one that would be good for this job. So Reeves convinces Trevanny to commit a murder. He does the murder. He gets paid for it. And then Reeves, of course, just like we saw the last time, that murder just begets more violence. And so Reeves wants Trevanny to do another murder and even threatens his family. And then Ripley is like, no, I don't think we should do that. Trevanny decides to go ahead with the murder anyway because Reeves is kind of sending him to a specialist in Germany where he can get checked up on. The specialist tells Trevanny that he is still the same. He's still sick. He's still going to die. And Trevanny goes onto the train to do the deed. Ripley shows up, thankfully, and helps Trevanny do the murder and then kill the two bodyguards along with the murder. And I will pass it back to you.
And that, I should say, that scene is played very similarly in many respects to The American Friend. That it's almost exactly the same. I mean, aesthetically different, but the plot is more or less the same. Trevanny, of course, he had no idea that Tom was involved in any of this, so he's, of course, surprised and shocked. There's this really interesting conversation they have after that, but then they head back to Italy. Unfortunately, the gangsters, one of them survives, and they get wind that Reeves was involved, and they pursue him to the little town where both Ripley and Trevanny live. They kidnap and kill Reeves, but before killing him, torture him, apparently, and they get enough intelligence that leads them to Ripley's estate. Trevanny goes to Ripley's estate to help out, and they kind of have this nighttime vigil, and eventually two of the gangsters show up, Ripley and Trevanny together, get the drop on the two of them, kill them, burn the bodies, and they think it's over and done with because they made one of them call the friends and said, no, these were the wrong guys. So they think it's done, but then Ripley drops Trevanny off at his home. By the way, Ripley and Trevanny at this point seem very friendly. Whatever sort of antipathy existed between them at the beginning of the film has been overcome. And again, that's similar to The American Friend. But two more gangsters are menacing his wife, threatening to choke her to death. They're about to kill her and Trevanny, but Ripley has caught wind of what's happening. He shows up and he kills both of them, but one of the gangsters gets a shot off. Trevanny leaps in front of Ripley and takes the bullet and dies within seconds in front of Sarah, the wife. She's enraged at Ripley, spits on him. He leaves, gives her some advice about kind of how to clean the incident up. And then he leaves and then shows up just in time with flowers for Louisa's big harpsichord concert. And then in the final scene, Ripley flashes back to Trevanny's death. And Trevanny seems to be smiling as he's dying, and Ripley smiles at the memory or something. And we end with Louisa playing the harpsichord brilliantly.
Mm-hmm. So you've got a question about protagonists.
Okay, you can only name one. Who's the protagonist?
Oh, wow.
And stipulated
protagonist?
there are good arguments
Yep.
for Tom Ripley or Trevanny.
Yeah.
That's why I said you could only name one.
Trevanny.
Tell me why.
Okay. I would say that if we're going for kind of traditional and sort of easier to locate, that Trevanny has the most obvious arc. When we meet him, he is in denial about his condition, and he is angry about it. Understandably, he is a young man. He has a beautiful wife that maybe they were planning on having a family, and he has a future in front of him. He also is frustrated that Sarah, his wife, has to work to support them. You get the sense the picture framing is not really going that well.
Sarah's got a boss who enjoys looking up her skirt when she goes up on a ladder to hang things, which Trevanny watches in mute rage.
So, and then, I mean, even though it's not the character development that Trevanny would choose for himself, it is development. And he goes through the horrors of first like assassination and then sort of violent mistakes. And then finally culminates in telling Ripley, hey, both this guy that we just convinced to call his boss knows what both of us look like. And if we let him go, this is just going to continue. And they shoot him in cold blood. So Trevanny basically discovers himself in this process of becoming a violent person. And, picks a violent death over the slow, frustrating, impotent death that is basically in store for him. And so I think that he is our traditional protagonist. And what makes this movie just so wild is the constant presence of John Malkovich and Tom Ripley, because they kind of both exist in this movie to great effect. Like, it's one of these wild things where the actor, you're never not conscious that it's John Malkovich.
Yeah.
He's basically doing John Malkovich as Tom Ripley.
Or this is just what John Malkovich is sort of just like this,
Right.
that one suspects. One hopes not, because Tom Ripley's a cold-blooded dude.
Yeah.
But
and so so Ripley is this just like odd thing that kind of nudges Trevanny into his like fulfilling his character arc. And the pleasure of the movie for me is this very traditional character development set next to like a great and very odd and unsettling performance. And like, that's why I think it's so good. But yeah, that's who I think the protagonist is. How about you?
I'm glad you chose Jonathan Trevanny, and I think those are all good reasons. I have an argument that it's Tom Ripley, but I think I'm actually going to save it for after our show and tells. I think we've got some show and tells coming up that will bolster my argument. I mean, I do think you're right about him making a choice and choosing a violent death that he chooses over an impotent death. And that theme is reinforced in quite a few ways. I do think that is Jonathan Trevanny's journey. And I'll make my argument later in our talk, I think.
Yeah. So like, I've got this question here about source and product, and it's not totally correct, but we have the same source material for An American Friend and Ripley's Game. And just can you just compare and contrast your experience of these two? I'm not asking for which one is better or anything like that, because I don't think that's a very interesting distinction. And I think they're both great. But like, what is your experience of this source material? How is it different in these two works?
Well, I think that this is a more straightforward telling of the book. And you have not read this book, right?
I have not read the book.
I read it probably 10 years ago, so I don't remember it very well. I do remember I enjoyed it. It's more, this version is more straightforward, but it is, I think that The American Friend is more and arguably sort of more postmodern and more post-thriller, more abstract expressionist than this film. And I think that this film, I think it's because the directors have different things that they're interested in. And so I do think that the real key to The American Friend is sort of Tom Ripley yearning for friendship and yearning to be a complete human and kind of being on the edge of that with Jonathan, and then, before he loses it. And it's very much about kind of creating visual textures and, again, you can't really track this film. You can track the plot, like the plot makes sense.
Right.
I mean, that one you don't. It's the same story, but you can't really track the plot, and there are these sort of weird, bizarre moments. It kind of feels like the actors are improvising more, and I think the effect is to get this greater sense of maybe how it would actually feel if you were living in a thriller, as opposed to what it feels like to watch a thriller. And also, I think where it really shines is just the chemistry between, it's Ripley and Jonathan, as played by, why am I not remembering his name right? Dennis Hopper
and Bruno Ganz.
And Bruno Ganz. Like, I think the whole film is kind of built around their chemistry, in a way. This film, I think, if you look at Liliana Calvani's filmmaking history, which I spent a little time doing today, she's best known for a movie that came out in the 1970s called The Night Porter. I really want to see The Night Porter now. It's quite well regarded. It's messed up, as I understand it. It's set in 1950s Germany, and one of the characters who might be, I think it's a film where you're like, who's the protagonist? The man who might be the protagonist is an ex-Nazi working at a fancy hotel who recognizes one of the guests as somebody he tortured at Dachau who survived. She recognizes him. And of course, he's afraid that he's going to be found out and prosecuted, but instead they have a wild, tumultuous love affair.
Oh my God.
Right. And I definitely feel like a theme. I mean, I think that Liliana Calvani is interested in morality, and she comes from an anti-fascist family. She's very much concerned with evil and the Holocaust, but I think one of the things she's interested in is the attractiveness and the seductiveness of evil. And I think even, Malkovich's Ripley, certainly amoral. Is he pure evil? I don't know. But he is a bon vivant. He is a libertine. He lives for pleasure. And, even just the way he interacts with Louisa, his wife, he's very seductive around her, but kind of domineering in a way. There's something creepy about his affection for her. She is kind of a possession in a way, although he also, one has the sense that they have sort of in an open marriage. At one point, she sort of jokes around with whether or not he's going to seduce Trevanny's wife, and doesn't seem particularly troubled by the prospect. And, you can infer from that maybe she has her own affairs from time to time, and that, that they have this sort of hedonistic and sort of almost like post-morality world that they share, which you see with Eloise in the last film that we watched too, Ripley Underground. And so I think the theme here is more like the attraction to evil and how violence and evil might be seductive and even empowering. And so that's Jonathan Trevanny, who is dying and impotent, and both impotent in the sense of powerless to prevent his death, but also in the sense of impotent in bed with his wife. his solution
until he kills
somebody. and so I think the film is trying to put us in the position of feeling how seductive evil and violence and cruelty can be, and then making us sort of shudder at ourselves about that. And I don't think that's what The American Friend is trying to do.
No, I think you're right. That's a really good contrasting of the two without getting into like which is better, which is silly. But what you said about Louisa, I think the other thing about that relationship, you get the sense that Ripley is Louisa's muse. Like when it looks like he might not make it to the performance, you get a very strong sense that she either is not going to be able to play or knows that it's not going to be a good performance.
Right.
Like she looks resigned and hesitant, whereas before she was looking confident.
Well, and of course the last thing she knew, like some men may be coming to the manor. It may not go well, like
I'll be there.
Yeah. I mean, I think she's wise enough to know that there might be some violence happening, and so if Tom doesn't show up for the concert, that might be because Tom is dead, know. But you're right. They have a very interesting relationship. They're very devoted to one another,
and it's transactional. I mean, that's kind of what I was getting to with the seduction thing. Is that like it?
Turn over, and I'll tell you.
Right. I know. Oh my God. Yeah. It's really. I mean, it's in some ways. I mean, it's like this. It's this weirdly hot movie.
Yeah.
Like the moments of like, and I think you're right that Calvani is doing that on purpose, and it does have the effect of ramping up the discomfort, because as like entertaining and fun and good as this movie is, like you never get away from a sense of discomfort. And then that's impressive that she is able to keep that running throughout the whole film.
Yeah. But I also totally understand Trevanny's regard for Ripley too. Like, at the end where he's become very loyal to Ripley, and Ripley has said, "Go home, find your wife. I'll handle the gangsters." And Trevanny's, "No, I'm going to stay with you," and refuses to, and sort of does the vigil together. And you're like, yeah, good for you, Trevanny. Stand by your man, Tom Ripley. And then if you were to analyze that rationally, you're like, oh, Trevanny doesn't owe Tom Ripley anything. But
Ripley owes Trevanny something.
Yeah, which he, to his credit, sort of tries to pay back. That's I think an interesting part of the story. Mm-hmm. So I want to do a quick show and tell, and then I have a question, and then maybe I'll give you my full answer to why I think Tom might be the protagonist. So this is after poor Jonathan has been killed. Ripley has dashed over and has arrived, and Louisa has started her harpsichord performance, and he's watching. He's sort of looking around, and then he flashes back to the events earlier. The gangster firing the pistol. Trevanny leaps in front, takes the bullet. Very like Ripley's eye view of these events now. Trevanny's falling down in slow motion, and he's looking up at Tom. And is it me, or does he smile a little bit?
No, he does. Yeah. I mean, like his mouth, his eyes. Yeah.
And now we're back in the performance. Louisa looks up at Tom. Tom thinks to himself for a second and then smiles.
And laughs.
And then the movie ends. What's going on with that smile? Both of those smiles.
Trevanny's and Malkovich's.
Yep.
I guess Trevanny and Ripley's.
Malcotoms.
Ripleyovich.
Riplevich.
Ripleyovich.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think Trevanny's smile, in my reading, that's an easy one for me. It's the culmination of the sense of purpose, and that Trevanny has felt like he has accomplished something. And that's what he wants. I mean, he is, we see him as a literally and figuratively impotent person. And here he has done something real for somebody else. Ironically, it's the person who has kind of gotten him into the whole mess and gotten him killed. But that's not really the point, because Trevanny's going to die anyway. So Trevanny's smile is easier than Ripley's smile. I internalize the smile as that this chapter is closed. And he has enjoyed it to some degree, and he's moving on, and he gives a little chuckle at the sort of like the wild tosses of fate that the world provides to him and to everybody else in the world. And he's moving on. And we even get the harpsichord sound, but we also get a bass line in that music that is not harpsichord based. We are getting, but it's playing a long time with the music of the harpsichord. So we're getting the intrusion of the film into the closing minutes of the harpsichord music, which is probably going to suggest to us subconsciously that the fiction is closing.
Yeah.
And that like things are wrapping up, and very quickly this narrative is going to disappear into the place where all narratives have to disappear, our imaginations. And it's one of the reasons why Malkovich is perfect in this role, because I can't really think of many other actors that can pull off this moment. And Malkovich is made for it. Like he is so great at this kind of like, okay.
Well,
and like
that happened.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think is happening with the smile. How about you?
Well, I completely agree with you about Trevanny, and you said it earlier too, which is that he is chosen to take action and to be in charge of his own destiny. So he doesn't get shot by the gangster helplessly. He leaps in front of Tom and takes the bullet, maybe because he's going to die anyway. But also, he chooses to take control of his life, and he is an actor, and he dies on his own terms, and I think that's what the smile is. And also, a sort of like, well, at least both of us didn't die, like sort of looking up at Tom and being like, good luck, at least one of us survived, And then I think with Tom, I think this is going to go into my argument why I think maybe Tom Ripley is the protagonist. And there are a couple sort of classical structural framings. One is the very first character we see is Tom Ripley. And we very much get him in state A, which is sort of a relatively polite, snobby art dealer who can beat you on the head and kill you. Oh, sorry about that. Nice, Icarus. Sort of this cold-blooded killer, really. He at one point he says, sorry about your friend, but it's not super sincere. I mean, I think he's sort of like, I wish it hadn't been necessary to beat your friend's head in with a poker. But that's tough. In the book, there's a moment. There's literally a sentence in the book. I read the first chapter of the book today, and there's a sentence in the book that says Tom despised murder, except when it was absolutely necessary. And yes, you get that there. And then I think that similar to The American Friend, I do think that Tom goes on a journey, because at first he just wants to punish Trevanny, and then he realizes the punishment has gone too far, that Trevanny has sort of shown his mettle, and then he becomes protective of him. Yeah. And I dare say he likes him. And I think he, this Englishman who insults him has jumped through the hoops that Tom has carefully laid for him. And once he's sort of proved that he is an equal, and also you get the sense that he didn't really mean the insult, or maybe it's just because he's depressed about his blood disease. I think this Ripley comes to like Trevanny, and he is willing to say, you've done your part, go home with your wife, I'll take care of the gangsters. And so I think he comes to find regard, and so I actually interpret the smile as Tom recognizing that his friend died bravely and as the master of his destiny. And just recognizing in that moment, I think that's how he would want to go, and acknowledging that, and that what we have is a little bit of growth because Tom actually now cares about somebody a little bit, and somebody other than his wife. I think the first time I saw the movie, I interpreted it as, whew, better him than me. I interpreted it as a much more cold-blooded smile because I remember it. But just watching it this time, and maybe I'm giving Tom too much credit, I do think you get this protagonist arc of somebody who doesn't really care about anybody. His wife, he has an odd, but I don't know, it's not exactly empathetic attraction to. It's sort of more like they're peas in a pod. And also there's a sexual relationship, which I don't think you get with Trevanny. So instead, it's male friendship, which is different than romantic love for a woman, or even friendship with a woman. And I think it's Tom Ripley's first friend in his adult life. And I think that's what he's smiling about. I made a friend, and,
And now he's dead.
And, Louisa's playing her beautiful harpsichord, which I had restored. I don't know. I could be wrong about that, but that's my argument. And there's a moment, and I think one of us might share it as a show and tell. There's this weird limbo scene after the second series of murders where they're in like the blue afterlife in this restroom where Tom says something like, Trevanny's like, why did you do this? Why did you set me up? And then why did you help me? And he's losing his shit. And Tom says something, he has this really interesting thing he says about that's the way the game is played. But then he says something like, and this is for why I helped you. Well, I don't know, but doesn't surprise me. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that we're constantly being born, and that's the statement of a protagonist, right? Like a protagonist is constantly being born. And I think both Tom and Trevanny, if we're really being half-assed and wishy-washy, we could say that they're both protagonists. But even though Tom's arc is more micro in a plot sense, the growth between sort of pure psychopathy and a little bit of empathy and caring for another human is actually quite a lot of growth for Tom Ripley. So that's my case for why, and it's called Ripley's Game, Right. It's not called Trevanny Gets Put Through Hell, Picture Framer
a much
frames
worse
himself.
title. Yeah. No, I mean, something you just said just like really, makes something click. So the attraction of Ripley in general, and I think this Ripley in particular, is that he does have a moral code. It's just the moral code of something that is incredibly alien to our experience. Yeah. Like Ripley always acts, there's the, I don't know if you've ever read Adam Grant's Give and Take. He divides people into givers, matchers, and takers. You could make a case that Ripley is a taker, but actually I think he is like the ultimate matcher. Yeah. Because he, as you kind of point out, he was willing to go with the deal, the beginning art deal. But then once people start changing the rules on him, don't change the rules on Tom Ripley, because he's like, oh, well, now I'm just going to get rid of you. And that's, like we keep bringing up the line about the watch, but the line about the watch is the key to this alien psychology. Right. Because Ripley is like, this moment that you and I have been quoting at each other for like 23 years now. Oh, and take my watch, because if it breaks, I'll kill everyone on the train. And it's just this, you're like, what? And you think sociopath, but you're like, no, he has a set of values. They're just really strange, and they're really, really different from ours. And I think what you're describing is a really good, illustration of that moment, that in Ripley's completely bizarre moral schema, he's happy. And he goes and saves Jonathan because Reeves has gone too far. Like, he tells Reeves, no, he's paid his price. And the funny thing is the only price that Trevanny has, the only offense is that he insulted Ripley at a party.
Yeah.
But as we were talking about earlier, probably the worst thing that you could say to Tom Ripley is that he's rich, but he has no taste.
Yeah. And I think part of it, does Tom recognize his cruelty and repent? Or does he just consider the score matched?
No, I think he considers it matched.
It's like it's matched, and then Reeves tried to overmatch, and I had to correct that because, that's really interesting. I hadn't really occurred, but you're right. It is sort of consistent, and it is sort of like Tom. I really don't think you should come to Cortina. And, that's when he hatches the murder plan. He's like, I thought we were going to go to Cortina together. I thought I was invited. You're uninviting me, and that you're right. This is the consistent thing, which is, Tom Ripley doesn't kill anybody who plays it straight with him. It's always somebody who betrays him or something like that, who violates the rules. I mean, it's almost a kind of, It suggests a kind of neurodivergence that is not quite sociopathy. It's more about, there are people who get very, very, it's lawful evil, right? There's people who get very, very indignant when the code is broken. Right. And they'll go along, with the plan, even if, but once this person is no longer reliable, then all bets are off. And that's what happens to the poor art dealer at the beginning. Yeah. He has shown himself to be a betrayer of the understanding, and he deserves no sympathy. As Tom put it, he flew too close to the sun. I was waiting for him to just tip that statue over.
I know, me too. I know. I was like,
Tom wouldn't do that to a perfectly good statue,
right? And that was my next thought too. I was like, I don't think Tom would go that far because I mean, like, things are more important to Tom than people.
Yeah,
but it's not. But it's much more interesting than just a weird materialist kink. Yeah, like, things and more importantly, rich things.
And the craft that goes into them too.
Yeah, exactly. Right, because it's the same craft that he has. Yeah. And my favorite line in this movie is the moment of the gifted improviser. Yeah. Which, like, I went digging, like, where does that show up in any other descriptions or anything?
I don't even think it's in the novel either. I think it's just in the screenplay.
Yeah. It's a stroke of fucking genius about Tom Ripley, because, like, he is a gifted improviser. Yep. But he's not an artisan. Yep.
And he knows it. I mean, that's like, he doesn't try to paint. He doesn't try to play the harpsichord. He buys Louisa, the harpsichord. And he buys it's why he kind of admires a picture framer too, because what is the picture frame? It's the thing that emphasizes the image. It's the thing that allows the craft of the image to be displayed and to be properly appreciated. So he has a sort of respect for that craft, however humble it might be.
Yeah. It's a stroke of Highsmith's genius to have made that character a picture framer. Like, just such a, like, the ultimate kind of, like, bourgeois, like, traditional bourgeois definition, like bourgeois, but high art adjacent. And that's a perfect foil for Ripley.
Yeah, he would live in Dovetail in the Diamond Age.
Right, yes, exactly. Yeah, of course. So I've got a question about balance in this film. Malkovich and Winstone are just brilliant. They're really, really good. The actor who plays Trevanny is pretty good.
Pretty good.
Lena Headey is not great. and I just... There are moments in this film where it feels uneven to me, and it doesn't lessen it for me, but, like, I don't know, are there moments where it feels out of balance? It sort of feels slightly out of balance to me in a way that An American Friend didn't.
Well, I don't agree with and by the way, I looked this up. I believe she pronounces her name Lena Headey.
Lena Headey. Okay.
Yeah. But I have always referred to her as Lena Headey or Lena Headey or Lena. It's Lena Headey. Lena Headey.
Rini McGreedy, as my art teacher would say, talking about
Lena Headey hanging out with Rena McGreedy discussing postmodern art at the Framer shop. I didn't think her performance was bad. I think it was kind of a one-dimensionally written character. Because, I mean, she has to... I mean, a lot of what she's doing is just sort of like... There's nothing surprising about her character. She is concerned. She's the thing that Jonathan has to manage, but also the thing that he cares about the most. And I thought she did that as well as you could do without very much to work with. But... this feels like a really good made-for-TV movie in some respects. Yeah. It feels low budget. It feels like a BBC production where it's like, okay, we can afford 2 sets and a train. So what are we going to do with that? And I was even looking at the Oscars for 2002, and I was like, this film has the craft of all of these movies, but it doesn't have the production value of any of them. And so that was a thing I noticed. I mean, the gangsters... they're sort of like, second shelf TV actors for the most part. DeGray Scott, I do think there's one performance he gives really well where Lena Headey, his wife, Sarah, confronts him and he's stashing some money away. And then he portrays bad acting because she confronts him of lying and then he tries to act offended even though... and angry, but of course he probably isn't. He's probably upset that he's been caught.
Yep.
But he's not a good actor, and so he's like, I've been going to this clinic to try to make a future, and I finally got some money for you and our family, and you are calling me a liar. And I thought it was brilliant because you could like. It's almost a good performance, but you could see Jonathan, the character, overacting.
Yeah.
And whereas like DeGray Scott would actually be a pretty better performer. I watched a brief clip of him in another movie, and I was like, oh, he's definitely a method actor because he was playing a total... like you could imagine him as a character actor where he always plays a kind of like handsome... Joe Everyman, but no, he plays a lot of different kinds of characters. So I didn't have any complaints about the cast. I do think that, Ray Winstone and Malkovich stand out, but I thought the other two were pretty strong. But there is a kind of like low budget BBC production quality. There's not a lot of saturation. You don't get the colors you get with Wim Wenders. One gets the sense it was shot on cheaper cameras and that they didn't have time to wait for the best lighting. Maybe they had to shoot 2 pages a day instead of 1, so they don't have time for elaborate setups. The camera work isn't extraordinary, although even that last sequence we just watched. The camera angle, the Ripley's eye view of Trevanny going down, that's pretty good. The slowed down sound, I could tell as an audio producer, that was done with like an off-the-shelf audio suite slowdown effect. I could hear the kind of digital processing. There's something a little bit cheap about it. And that's not a huge complaint. I actually, I admire that they probably scraped up whatever it was, like $15 million to make this film and made such a great...
cost 30 and it grossed 6. Yeah.
It didn't have an American release.
It didn't have, it just went straight to DVD in the US.
And that might be the reason, is that it kind of looks like a little bit of like a BBC made for TV production. And that's kind of sad. I mean, I forget. I mean, Adaptation was a great movie. I haven't seen The Pianist, but I assume it was great. But there are many films that came out in 2002 of which I would rather see this movie in the theater than those movies. And I think it's Roger Ebert says this is the best Ripley film. I don't think I agree, but I think it's very, very good. And I think it's sad that it didn't do better than that. And it's also probably like a victim of its low budget, because low budget means low marketing budget. I mean, it didn't even get an American release. Come the hell on. Like, that's a crime.
And which is weird, especially given that we're only 3 years removed from The Talented Mr. Ripley. And you think, like, why didn't this get... there was this one odd moment when I thought like, I was like, oh, this is shot on film. And then like the next shot, I was like, no, this is shot on digital. And I was like, is that even possible?
Yeah, that's possible.
But there's some of the exteriors
them,
are film. It have that like beautiful look of film, and then all of the interiors have a look of digital.
That would make sense too, because I say this as though I know what I'm talking about. I could be wrong, but my sense is if you have a limited budget for film, and you have limited film stock with your budget, setting up a tripod outside of an exterior and shooting a tripod shot with film, you can probably get something that looks great without a very difficult setup. Whereas then if you're going to be moving the camera around in an action sequence, you need faster film, you need faster cameras, you need higher tech, and you need more cinematography expertise. And that might not have been available to this particular production too. And, so I feel like if you're going to do it that way, but if Wim Wenders had filmed this, like all of the scenes would have been at dusk or dawn, there is I do like the moment where they've had their nighttime vigil and Tom opens the doors and looks out at the estate in the foggy morning. There was actually really good sound design in the, when they're waiting for the gangsters to come. The clocks are in stereo. You really get the sense of being in this like still menacing space, safe for now, but waiting for things to get dangerous. And I thought that was done very well.
Yeah, I love that section. Like, it's so weird that the gangsters don't show up until like the next morning, and you get this kind of like this sleight of hand trick.
It's a little bit, it kind of has this sort of heroic, Homeric quality. The warriors sat up all night and spoke of many things, and by the morning they were friends together and had sweared their oath of loyalty as brothers or something. It has that kind of quality. Like they stood vigil together all night.
And I think most movies of this ilk wouldn't have the taste to recognize that as a useful choice. Like, I think a lot of movies around, like, maybe a lower budget movie, something like that, there's some action, they'd be like, no, do it at night. Like, that's when it always happens. And I really love that section. It's really just this odd, quiet section of the film. And then they do the violence, drive the car to burn the bodies. While the car is burning,
Tom calls for the flowers.
Order flowers.
Can we do 5 dozen if you have them?
This is incredible. Like,
that's wonderful.
I like the red ones. Like, it's just so good. So like, it's such a great scene. It's really good. But let's do your show and tell. I sort of suspect where we're going, but I'm excited to.
All right. Well, I'll do it since it worked so well last time. I will do it the same way. Shout out to VLC Media Player. It is a free open source program that plays nicely with other software. Okay. Seeing that?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Here we go.
Jonathan, I don't want to rush you, but the flight to Milan leaves in a little over an hour.
Oh, please. It's no rush. I realize I've had over 20 minutes to adjust to becoming one of Europe's most wanted, and I'm extremely aware of how ludicrous I must seem to you.
I wonder if this is a real bathroom where they built
shaking
this
and my positively
in a
shockingly
studio.
awful normalness.
Because it's a wonderfully neutral
I
space.
do hope that you will forgive me. I can't look at my son. I can't look at my son. I can't explain how I made $100,000, and I really, really fear that I am in fact ill. I'm not well.
Ich bin von der Ausländerbehörde. Können Sie bitte rausgehen?
Gut, ich gehe raus.
Dankeschön.
Great little joke, almost. Tom is a brilliant improviser.
I should thank you, because I wouldn't be alive now if you hadn't helped me, but I can't say it. I can't say thank you. I don't know anything about you. Who are you?
I'm a creation. I'm a gifted improviser. I lack your conscience, and when I was young, that troubled me. It no longer does. I don't worry about being caught because I don't believe anyone is watching. The world is not a poorer place because those people are dead. It's not. It's one less car on the road. It's a little less noise and menace. You were brave today. You put some money away for your family. That's all.
If you lack my conscience, then why did you help me on the train?
I don't know, but it doesn't surprise me. The one thing I know is that we're constantly being born.
Why me? Why did you pick me?
Partly because you could. Partly because you insulted me. But mostly because that's the game. We have to get this flight. Shall we?
He should have won something for that.
I have to say it's a really hard scene for Doug Ray Scott to play. Like, he's got to be up against calm, and he has to be reacting. I mean, I can see it. I can see. It's just hard. What do you make of mostly that's just how the game is played?
Because he's responding to Trevanny's question about why me.
Why me? And presumably that means, why did you put me through this? Like, why did... Yeah.
And Ripley's first answer is weird. Because you're good. And
because you could do it? Was it because you're good?
I thought he said because you're good.
Huh.
Maybe I'm wrong. That's what I thought he said.
That would be amazing. Let's double check. I'm curious if you're right about that. That's an incredible. I thought he said because you could do it.
Huh. Yeah, let's go listen. I thought it was because you're good, but the audio is really quiet on my side. So
okay. I'll try to turn it up a little bit. That could be. All right, let's try again. This is interesting.
It's probably like 105, 106 or something.
Why did you pick me?
Partly because you could. Partly because you insulted me. But mostly because that's the game.
Oh, you could.
You could.
Partly because you could. Okay, so that, I wish it was partly because you're good. That would be wonderful and weird and strange and fitting. It would be perfect.
I don't think Tom Ripley cares. It's like...
Yeah,
that would suggest that he's vindictive against good. I don't think he is. I don't think good or evil are characteristics that he pays attention to one way or the other.
No, he doesn't. And he just said that. He's basically like, when I was young, that bothered me. Now it doesn't. Yeah. What a great dismissal of one's previous moral failings. But so because you could, and that fits very nicely with Ripley's worldview. Like competence and ability are crucial if you're going to match people. Partly because you insulted me, it makes a lot of sense. And then, but mostly because that's the game. And there's this other part. I'm not worried about being caught because I don't believe that anyone's watching.
Yeah.
And that's another clue. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to articulate a perfect answer because we're hearing the words of, and again, what we talked about earlier, like Ripley's moral schema is alien. It's just not something that we have access to, and that's the thing about trying to depict alien cultures is that they're never going to be things that make sense to us. Like, I don't know if you've seen Scavenger's Reign or if you've looked at any of or if you've heard about it or watched it or anything like that.
It's a video game.
It is a HBO animation. And it's a crew that has been wrecked on a planet. And what they pulled off in terms of just the wild differences in flora and fauna that we would never be able to, like, it just doesn't make sense to us.
Yeah.
And that's what I think there is a game for Ripley that has evolved for him over the years. And that's why I think, like, this is such an incredible movie, because we get Ripley at his apex. We get the full man, the fully at ease with himself and who he is. In a way that maybe that earlier Ripley from the book is still working his way through the moral issues of who he is.
Yeah.
And I think that this particular Ripley does view the world as this transactional game, where it is this, like, it's this whole thing of matching, and we can all get along if we all just do things the way that I think they should be played.
Yeah. There's no need for murder, but...
Right. I mean, that line that you said earlier is great. Like, he detested murder except for when it was obvious. It makes me think of I can't remember the name of the cyclist, but it's in the 50s. And he's being asked by an interviewer. And in those days, the performance enhancing drugs were essentially cocaine and speed. Like, that was it. It was stimulants.
Yep.
And the interviewer was like, do you ever take the drugs? And, I don't know if it's Jacques Anquetil or somebody like that, but he says, I only took some on the days when it was completely necessary. And the interviewer's like, when was that? Almost every day. And, which, like, makes sense. Like, those early Tours de France were insane. Like, nowadays it's like 2,000 to 3,000 kilometers. In the 40s and 50s, they would race 5,000 or 6,000 kilometers. Some of the stages were 300 miles long. Crazy.
Dick Butkus, I believe was a linebacker for the Bears in the 1960s and 70s, had a line. They were talking about injuries in football, and he said, I'm always trying to tackle them, but I never try to hurt anybody. Unless it was like a playoff game or something like that.
What a great, yeah. I mean, we reveal ourselves in interviews.
Yeah. Especially then. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like a less scripted or polished era.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I also think it's the matching thing that you're talking about. I think you put your finger on it. It's that there is a code, and there's even regard, and there's even obligation in Ripley's world. It's just it follows different rules than what most of us are used to. And I don't know, it's a weird thing too, because maybe this is the fantasy. Like, he's an objectively bad guy, but like this Ripley, I think part of why it's enjoyable and why probably you're rooting for Ripley and Trevanny when the gangsters come, I felt like I was, is that, yeah, I have this sense that Ripley would be okay with me, right? Because I'm not going to do anything. He would not find it absolutely necessary to murder me. Right. I'm not going to do anything to necessitate that. It's people like Reeves and these gangsters and other people who are kind of creating all the problems in the world. And he's just, going about his business, trying to solve them. And even though it should be very disturbing. And I think that's what, Liliana Calvani is trying. She's trying to catch us being attracted to evil. Mm-hmm. She's trying to get us to catch ourselves being attracted to evil, I think, is what's going on, and then making us feel weird about that. Mm-hmm. There's something attractive, and I could say this: like, can you for John Malkovich, can you imagine a more fun role to play?
Oh my God, no. I mean, other than himself and being John Malkovich.
Yeah, but he doesn't even get to kill anybody in that one. Yeah. He does get to sleep with Catherine Keener, so that
that makes up for it. It's funny. Both of us have a distaste for the Dungeons and Dragons alignment system, which we should. That speaks well of us. I think he's lawful neutral.
Oh, interesting.
Like the code is all that matters.
Yeah.
And whether you are going to act in the interest of others or the interest of yourself. And that's usually the way that D&D handles morality, is that if you're acting solely in the interests of yourself, you're evil. And then whether it's chaotic, lawful, or neutral, add some shading to it. And if you're going to act in the interest of others, you're good. But I think he is lawful neutral. Does Ripley kill anyone in this movie who is not an inveterate criminal?
No.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, and I think you're right that like Calvani is doing something really interesting where I think we're set up to think that that Ripley is evil, but he's not actually. And so we experience yet another sort of like loop-de-loop of moral confusion as the viewers.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, this is why we go to the movies. This is why we read books, to experience that transportation of morality. We get to experience these stuff with low stakes for ourselves. And you're right. Like, I don't think this Ripley would have a problem with you and me because we wouldn't be fucking with his shit.
Yeah.
And like, it's just I think this film is just a marvelous creation.
Yeah.
In the way that he is a marvelous creation. And I think that Calvani respects that about the character and about Malkovich, and then has the foresight to set all this up and then get out of the way.
The other thing I'll just say too is like the party that the Trevannys are throwing where everybody's hanging out and there's snacks being served and things like that. Is it me, or does that not happen as often as it did in the 90s? Like I mean, maybe it was just the pandemic and now the fact that I've lived in cities where I don't have as many friends, but it felt to me like I used to go to more gatherings like that in that era. And, they're listening to CDs on a Bose Wave, and they're making appetizers, and they're making stovetop espresso and passing it out. And the idea that even like people of fairly humble means can throw a pretty good party, and the people in the village would come. There was something, I kind of yearned for that a little bit too. And it's also specific to being kind of an expat community. Like it's essentially all the English speakers. Everybody there is either sort of American or Italian, it seems. Or sorry, American or English, it seems. Everyone's sort of an English speaking expat. But there's something about this movie that makes me feel a little nostalgic for the 90s too, in an odd way.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I can imagine us hanging out in your apartment on Munjoy Hill or Nicole Barrasso's, and like that sort of like, like everyone just sort of hung out and like sat on couches and drank coffee, and like,
we don't have a lot, but someone's going to bring some olives and someone will bring some crackers and cheese, and it'll work out,
And nobody has a phone or a computer out.
Yep.
We're all here.
We're just here. Here. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and we'll all notice it. Well, some trivia?
Yeah, let's do some trivia. All right. So you've been doing a little Liliana Calvani research today, so this might be a layup for you.
Okay.
So she's a somewhat uneven career in terms of critical acclaim. So, as you said, The Night Porter is her big hit in 1974. She also directed some flops with some odd casting choices. In Francesco, Mickey Rourke plays which religious icon? St. Francis Xavier, St. Francis of Assisi, St. Francis Borgia.
I know it's not St. Francis of Assisi because I actually looked at the cast for Francesco very briefly, and I didn't recognize the name. I was intrigued by that movie. Or I don't know if I looked at the IMDb. I think I looked at a Wikipedia entry. So give me the three options again.
St. Francis Xavier.
Yep.
St. Francis of Assisi. St. Francis Borgia.
I have actually seen a brief excerpt of the trailer for this movie too, with Mickey Rourke in it. I I don't really know. I mean, the only thing I know is that Saint Francis of Assisi is the one that I refer to as Saint Francis.
Well, if you were a Jesuit, you would pick Saint Francis Xavier.
Well, okay, that's enough of a clue that Mickey Rourke would never be a Jesuit, and you said it was an odd choice, so I'll go with Saint Francis Xavier.
It was Saint Francis of Assisi.
Really?
Yeah.
Mickey Rourke? I think of him as just sort of like the gentlest soul that's ever existed. Amazing.
Yeah. Mickey Rourke or St. Francis of Assisi?
St. Francis of Assisi.
Okay,
I don't think of Mickey Rourke that way.
You think Mickey Rourke is like the gentlest human being?
No,
on the
Mickey
planet?
Rourke is the American tough guy.
I know. That's why.
He's like Michael Madsen with a soul, you know?
Oh no, we're gonna start the Mads Mikkelsen problem.
Yeah, not Mads Mikkelsen.
Yeah, if there's one grand takeaway about this whole podcast, it is that I will finally keep Michael Madsen and Mads Mikkelsen straight.
You know what? That's how you keep the dementia at bay. You just got to keep burning those neural pathways into place, and when they start falling apart. All right, I buzzed. I've been buzzing a lot lately. I think that maybe the trivia's gotten harder. Maybe I'm getting stupider. All right, so trivia for you. Also about Liliana Calvani. You may have read this. So, as you said, her real breakthrough was the 1974 film The Night Porter, which was set in post-World War II Germany. But prior to that, she actually made a pretty good living as a successful TV documentarian in Italy. And some of her films got a lot of attention, and one of her works in particular was responsible for making her a nationally known filmmaker, which probably got her into the position of getting the funding to do The Night Porter. So was her kind of breakout documentary from the 1960s, a documentary. I'll say this too, is that you can see elements of this in Ripley's Game. I think all of these, I think I can see a connection between her documentary work and the movie we just watched. So a documentary about the Italian Women's Resistance Army who fought against Nazi Germany and Mussolini's government during World War II. B, a documentary about how the mafia profited from smuggling supplies to Nazi Germany during World War II. Or C, a profile of a former Nazi who worked at Dachau who was trying to atone for the horrific acts that he participated in.
Oh, gosh. A.
Correct. It was a documentary about the Italian Women's Resistance Army, and she interviewed one woman who had been caught and tortured in Dachau, and that woman she told a story about this woman's relationship with one of her torturers, which was the inspiration for The Night Porter.
Nice.
Although the woman did not have an affair with the torturer, but there was some kind of interesting story of empathy or regard or something like that got her thinking about that.
Got it.
So good job.
Your third option felt too neat.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh man, I'm overanalyzing it. It's just gonna be C.
Yeah.
But something about she is. I mean, it's interesting because this Ripley's Game is mostly about men.
Yeah.
But the two female characters and Louisa more so, I think, than Sarah.
Yeah.
There's Louisa is just a really interesting addition. And the whole muse and artist thing is inverted from its traditional kind of gender role. And I was like, you know what? I really feel like this is one of those directors who gets at her source material through a real variety of approaches. And so that's why I was like, I feel like it's the women's resistance, because I feel like she is very interested in subjects that involve women. I'm not going to say anything horrible the genre of women's fiction.
Right.
Which is happily not really a thing anymore.
Well, I have not seen The Night Porter, but my sense is Louisa could have been lifted straight, she would fit right in The Night Porter. Nice. That's my sense. One of the themes it explores is sort of the eroticism of evil and amorality, and All right. Well, Chris Begg, will you actually I have two questions, so you can answer. Two questions. Will you watch this again? And do you think you're going to read the book Ripley's Game now that we've seen two movies that draw from it?
Yes, on both counts. I just this is a movie I want to share with people. You know, I could watch it alone again, but it would be more fun to share it with somebody. You know, because it's great and it's weird. And it's one of those where you want to find somebody and be like, hey, do you want to watch something like weird and good?
I love it. I mean, I will definitely watch it again. I went back and read the first chapter in Ripley's Game, and I think it's pretty good. In fact, I have a quick excerpt if you want, if you would like.
Yeah, great. Yeah, no, this is good because, like, yes, wet my whistle.
Ripley's Game, Chapter 1, Page 1. There's no such thing as a perfect murder, Tom said to Reeves. That's just a parlor game, trying to dream one up. Of course, you could say there are a lot of unsolved murders. That's different. Tom was bored. He walked up and down in front of his big fireplace, where a small but cozy fire crackled. Tom felt he had spoken in a stuffy, pontificating way. But the point was, he couldn't help Reeves, and he'd already told him that. Yeah, sure, said Reeves. He was sitting in one of the yellow silk armchairs, his lean figure hunched forward, hand clasped between his knees. He had a bony face, short, light brown hair, cold gray eyes. Not a pleasant face, but a face that might have been rather handsome, if not for a scar that traveled 5 inches from his right temple across his cheek, almost to his mouth. Slightly pinker than the rest of his face, the scar looked like a bad job of stitching, or as if perhaps it had never been stitched. Tom had never asked about the scar, but Reeves had volunteered once. A girl did it with her compact. Can you imagine? No, Tom couldn't. Reeves had given Tom a quick, sad smile, one of the few smiles Tom could recall from Reeves. And on another occasion, I was thrown from a horse, dragged by the stirrup for a few yards. Reeves had said that to someone else, but Tom had been present. Tom suspected a dull knife in a very nasty fight somewhere.
God.
And you know what that reminds me of? Is Heath Ledger's Joker telling everybody the same story. Yeah, you want to know where I got these scars?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's, you know, in Highsmith's world, everybody's playing a role.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like,
no such thing as a perfect murder. That's just a parlor game, right?
Yeah.
And that, yeah. I mean, you know, it's not a happy story.
No.
You know where it goes, but pretty good start. And then, you know, the next thing that happens is Eloise enters, and the two men have to change topics because Eloise does not approve of Reeves, and rightly so.
Right. It's just great that the actual possible truth of the scar is a problem of competence, a dull knife in a sort of a cheap fight. You know,
Tom
it's not
suspects, right?
Yeah.
Well, everybody, I'm so excited to tell you that next up is Dracula, the novel by Bram Stoker. Have you read the whole novel Dracula? I can't remember.
I have, but college. You know,
Okay.
I mean, an early college, like sophomore year. I mean, it's been a long time.
I read it like maybe 3 years ago for the first time, and
it's
really
I'm going
good.
to. It's almost certainly. I can remember snippets, and then unfortunately, like, layered over that are like moments of plot from Bram Stoker's Dracula with Keanu Reeves, and so like there are some. I'm looking forward to squaring the record in my brain,
Which I've actually never seen, and that was Coppola who directed it. I should probably watch that. Maybe I'll watch that at some point. Which, by the way, there's a scene in Interview with a Vampire that was very similar to Tom Ripley telling Jonathan that's how the game is played. There's a moment where the vampire, the young journalist who's interviewing the vampire says, "Wait, and you killed him and sucked his blood?" And the vampire says, "That's how it's done." Which I didn't finish that novel, but I mean, I assume there would be no Anne Rice without Bram Stoker. I think she is part of the what I'm calling the Dracula cinematic universe, even if Dracula doesn't exist in the same world as the vampire Lestat. I couldn't finish that novel because it was giving me nightmares.
Yeah, it's a little overfull as well. Like,
I would like to finish it one day, but maybe a day where like I'm sleeping well or something.
Yeah.
Not a time when I'm having difficulty sleeping because it won't help.
Well, Upper Middle Brow is a Small Point production. Chris Bagg and Jesse Dukes cook the eggs and the risotto.
Eggs is eggs.
Eggs is eggs. Music by Ben Pajak and Jesse Dukes. Design and website by me, Chris Bagg. We are supported by Jenny Grieve and Justin Reich. Find us on Patreon, where there are a number of tiers at which you could also show your support.
And a reminder, Chris and I are both writers and editors and can help you with your writing, podcasting, or editing project. You can see some of our portfolios and learn more at our respective websites, chrisbagg.com or jessedukes.com. Or you can enroll as a patron at the You Really, Really Like Us tier, which includes some one-on-one editorial time with one of us or the other. But that's a hard sentence, which includes some one-on-one editorial time with one of us or the other, or both. And we're now on Blue Sky. You can find us there at Upper Middle Brow. We're no longer on Twitter for now. If that place cleans itself up, we might go back. But for now, we have de-emphasized Twitter. Thanks, everybody. Eggs is eggs.
Eggs is eggs. That's the game.
That's the game. Look out for man traps. Do you want to tell me what you want, or do you just want some truffling pig to find you in a couple of months?
It's such a great line.
Yeah.
It's like, I also love that scene where Ripley is on the steps of the villa and Reeves is like 150 feet away. Yeah. and they're still having this like excellent scene where like Reeves is like, Reeves is coming apart. He knows he's about to die, and Ripley lets it happen. I love that scene.
Yeah, that is probably like the biggest plot hole, because after that, Tom just unlocks the gate so that Trevanny can get in and the gangsters can get in. I'm like, you don't think that Reeves would have come back and tried the gate, But apparently not.
Those blokes are they only move forward.